Anytime former President Trump speaks or posts, they're fighting words, let alone if he's talking about replacing Obamacare. Democrats jumping to the defense. The former president actually posted that he's looking at alternatives to the Affordable Care Act if he's elected. Now, this all started actually with a recent Wall Street Journal editorial citing Senator Elizabeth Warren, admitting that health insurers have increased costs and consolidated power despite the law. Mr. Trump then posting on Truth Social saying, quote, "The cost of Obamacare is out of control. Plus, it's not good health care. I'm seriously looking at alternatives," end quote. He called Republicans' failure to repeal it in 2017 a low point. President Biden also responding on Monday.
And my predecessors once again, God love him, called for cuts that could rip away health insurance for tens of millions of Americans in Medicaid. They just don't give up.
Let's bring in NewsNation political editor Chris Stirewalt. Okay, Chris, so is affordable health care no longer affordable?
Well, certainly there are problems related to that, but the big problem that Washington is eventually going to have to confront is that the expansion of Medicaid to include working class and middle class Americans has brought the program much closer to insolvency. So looming out over the horizon is this big problem that serious people here in Washington understand is sort of unavoidable. And we're talking here in like a 10 to 20 year time frame, not way out over the distant horizon. People, as we know, are happy or much happier with Obamacare than they were when it was passed, because people like this benefit, right? They like the ability to get subsidized health care through these exchanges. And that's exactly why Republicans couldn't repeal it.
But the New York Times has this headline saying Biden his campaign is aiming to weaponize Trump's threat to Obamacare. Is it a risk for the Biden campaign to go all in defending the status quo in light of the fact that certainly within the next few years, just citing the stats that you just gave, we might have to have a new plan?
Well, I suffice it to say that Donald Trump's truth post on that was ill-conceived. This is not what Republicans want to talk about. They tried this before, and the reason that the measure went down, you have to think about it this way. The reason Obamacare was unpopular was that most Republicans, almost all Republicans, opposed it, and because it was called Obamacare in their minds, as well as some group of Americans, considerable group of Democrats, who thought it wasn't generous enough. And then when Republicans went in to try to take it away, it became more popular. People became protective of those benefits. There's a reason Donald Trump is not willing to talk about Social Security and Medicare, even though those problems are barreling towards insolvency too. He doesn't talk about those things because older voters who are higher propensity voters, they voted at a much higher rate than younger Americans, don't want to hear any discussion, even if it's not about them, even if it's not about their benefits, even if it's a decade in the future. They don't want to talk about those things. I think for Trump, because he failed, right, and because he has always resented John McCain for his decision not to go along with the plan, which, by the way, wasn't to replace Obamacare, was to just repeal Obamacare with a promise to replace it later. Mm-hmm. He has always resented that so much that I think this is more about his personal struggles than it is a good campaign strategy. Democrats are going to talk about that a lot. Trump is going to probably end up trying to talk about it not at all.
But is it campaign strategy, or is it him just spouting off on something that he's passionate about, which is changing health care?
Who, Trump is passionate about changing health care?
That's the question is this strategy for him to actually mention Obamacare, or is he just talking off the cuff?
I do not think Donald Trump is passionate about changing health care. I think Donald Trump is passionate about immigration issues. I think he's passionate about foreign trade. I think he's passionate about a lot of things unrelated to policy. Healthcare just isn't a place where Republicans have been able to develop a consensus. And this goes back to when they opposed Hillary Care, as they called it at the time, in the Bill Clinton's first term of Bill Clinton. It's just not something where Republicans have been able to form a consensus. Even though they had a decade of opposing Obamacare, by the time they had the opportunity to replace it, they couldn't come to terms with themselves. So I think this is about Trump grousing about John McCain and his fellow Republicans who denied him a win when he was president. I don't think that this is, as you say, I don't think it's a serious campaign strategy.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.